The sky above Zephyr 9 shimmered like cracked glass, pale blue veins streaking across a dirty red dome. Dust storms hadn't hit this weekday of the moon yet, but you could smell the static coming. Air tasted of iron and ozone, airbenfe, dry, electric, hungry. And just below that blood-colored sky, the outpost known as Rift Station Delta clung to the planet's edge like a dying lung. Inside its fenced trade yard, Callan Rose stood with his jaw tight and one hand on his daughter's satchel, waiting for a stabilizer canister he'd paid too much for. He didn't plan to stay long, just enough to pick up fuel cells, protein packs, and replacement filters for the dome's cracked vent panel. No trouble, no talk, no charity. Then back to the ridge camp where his 7-year-old daughter, Mav, waited with tired eyes and a voice gone quiet since her mother's last breath. He hadn't planned on seeing the women. "Clearance stamped! Offload 'em!" someone shouted near the landing dock. A group of station workers dragged out a rust-covered shuttle container, the kind used for waste exports and condemned cargo. The lock hissed open with a mechanical groan, and from inside stepped 3 alien women, tall, underfed, barefoot on the cold stone deck. They didn't flinch, didn't speak, didn't lower their eyes. The crowd did what it always did, leaned in, muttered filth behind gloves, snorted like they were watching an animal display. A loudspeaker cracked. Unbonded hybrids. No family code, no Terra license, no caste registry, genetic instability at 4%, behavior markers non-compliant, classified unsalvageable. The man near the ramp, lean, scarred, stinking of rust, raised both arms and grinning like a merchant prince. "All 3 for 20. Don't ask for one. You take the lot, or they are spaced with dust." Callan stood still, eyes narrowed under the low brim of his dust hood. He wasn't here to play savior. Not again. He'd burned that part of himself on Earth when the Bio-Union Commission told him his wife's cancer didn't justify off-planet treatment. He'd gone rogue for her once, paid with exile, and still lost her. But something about the stillness of these women, the way they didn't beg, didn't cower, didn't even look surprised, scraped at something raw in his chest. The first one, tall with metallic blue skin and deep-set gold eyes, stood in front. Her hair was shaved on one side, the other braided with dull bands that glowed faintly in the cold. Her jaw was set, her back straight. She wasn't scared. She was waiting. The second, shorter and muscled, had marks across her arms, not tattoos but survival maps. The kind carved into skin when you've had to fight your own kind just to breathe another day. Her gaze swept the yard slowly, measuring every angle. The third was younger, barely adult in appearance. Her skin was pale lilac, eyes too big for her face. A nervous tremor ticked in her fingers as she pressed her hands to her midsection and scanned the faces watching her like meat. The merchant kept going, spitting sales pitch bile like he was proud of it. Genetically flawed, sure, but quiet, strong. They survived a failed bonding program on Eon Verge. That means they can work, or breed, or bleed. Take your pick. Cheap. A few voices jeered. One man laughed and asked if the tall one bit. The others joked about training them. How long before they start obeying orders? Callan turned to leave. Then he heard a sound behind his skull. Not words, not a voice, just silence. The kind that choked a room. The kind that crawled under your skin and stayed. He remembered that same silence in the airlock when Maeve whispered, "Is Mama gonna wake up now?" That same silence in the dome when she stopped asking. He turned back. The women hadn't moved, but the small one had her eyes on him now, just barely. Not pleading, not even hoping, just watching. "You buying or not?" the merchant snapped. "Clock's running. I ain't feeding them another day." Callan stepped forward. 10, he said flatly. 20, the man barked. Callan pulled a coin chit from his sleeve, tossed it underhand. It clicked against the merchant's boot. "You want 'em gone? Take the 10. I won't tell the border agents you're offloading banned stock without scans." The man glared, hesitated, then scooped the chit up. "Fine. All yours. They break something. It ain't on my file." Callan looked at the women. "You speak?" None replied. He gestured toward his hover sled. I've got a dome 6 clicks north. You want to stay a while, fine. If not, I'll drop you at the ridge line and you can vanish into the rocks. I don't own you. I don't want to. But I'm leaving now. Come or stay. The tall one moved first. Slow, deliberate, eyes locked on his. Then the others followed. The ride back was quiet. The crawler's engine whined against the icy dust trail. The sky darkened behind them, stars bleeding through the top of the dome as night came fast. Inside the rover, Mav stirred under her blankets, glancing at the 3 silent passengers Callan had brought without warning. She didn't ask who they were. She didn't say anything at all. The younger alien girl, the pale one, sat closest to her, hands clasped in her lap, posture rigid like she didn't know how long she'd be allowed to sit. Her gaze never met the child's. But when Maeve coughed once, the girl's fingers twitched toward her instinctively, then stopped. By the time they reached the dome compound, a worn prefab shelter pressed against a thermal generator and a collapsed biodome skeleton. The night had gone still and sharp. Stars cut the sky like shattered glass. Callan keyed the lock and let the hiss of repressurization fill the silence. He pointed to the inside chamber. Sleep inside. I'll bunk in the storage tank. Still no words, but the tall one nodded once. He watched as they moved inside, cautious but not afraid. That night, Callan stood outside in the wind, hands bare against the frostbit panel he'd been meaning to patch for weeks. He stared at the outline of the dome, glowing faintly under the artificial lights. He didn't know what they were, didn't know where they came from, didn't know what they wanted. But they were here, and his daughter hadn't hidden under the bed. That was enough, for now. The first morning arrived without violence, without sound, only the faint click of dew freezing on the dome's external panels and the gentle whine of the wind turbine spinning above the north bluff. Callan Rowe was already outside before the internal lights warmed. He moved in silence across the gravel path, heavy boots crunching frost underfoot. The air was thin here, even inside the dome field. It always stung the lungs first thing. He liked it that way. Inside, the women hadn't moved from where they'd bedded down. He could see them through the viewport, curled near the central heater in makeshift blankets he'd left out. None had tried to touch the tools. None had opened the sealed compartments. They had slept like they didn't know if they'd wake. The tall one, she was first to rise. She stood slowly, scanning the dome like a soldier might scan a kill zone, calm but alert. Then she walked toward the shelf where he'd left rations and water. She didn't eat. She simply observed, hands clasped behind her back, not aggressive, not afraid, measuring. Callan stepped inside. His thermal coat hissed as the warm air met the cold fibers. He didn't speak, just set down the toolkit and began repairing the cracked purifier in the wall panel. The woman turned, her eyes steady. "You don't lock the doors here," she said. Her voice was clear, low, tinted with an accent he didn't recognize. Somewhere between bone and breath. "I don't need to," he said. She stared a second longer, then returned to the heat vent. She sat with the others, still silent. The youngest, the pale one, leaned against the corner, arms wrapped around her knees. The muscled one, who hadn't said a word yet, stood watch near the side window, eyes half-lidded but never unfocused. Maeve came out of her room slowly, dragging her old thermal blanket. She paused in the hall when she saw them. The 3 alien women sitting in her home like ghosts who hadn't decided if they were staying or not. The youngest alien turned and blinked at her, head tilting slightly. Not like a predator, but like someone seeing a child for the first time. Maeve didn't run. She just stared, then sat down on the floor near the vent, blanket wrapped like armor. Callan didn't interrupt. He just kept working. That was how life was here. You did what needed doing, or you didn't survive. By midday, the sun turned harsh, spiking through the dome's fractured skylights and jagged beams. Dust clung to the light like static. It caught in Maeve's hair as she leaned against the far wall, sketching with a stub of carbon. Circles, faces, nothing with eyes. The tall woman stepped beside her. Maeve stiffened. The woman didn't speak. She crouched slowly, gently, and picked up the carbon stub when it rolled away. She handed it back, no words. Maeve took it, A long silence stretched between them, a strange tether. Then Maeve asked, quiet as a whisper, "What's your name?" The woman hesitated. Her jaw worked just slightly. Then she said, "Rel." Maeve nodded. "I'm Maeve." A moment passed. Then Maeve went back to drawing. That night, the power fluxed. Callan was in the outbuilding fixing the old wind battery coil when the internal lights inside the dome blinked once. Just a dim flicker, like the place was holding its breath. By the time he got inside, the muscled woman, the one with the scars, had already activated the backup generator correctly, without being told. She glanced at him once, then returned to her seat by the food prep station. She was washing nutrient packs with precision, folding them into warming trays like she'd done it before. Many times. "You been on Dome Outpost before?" he asked. She didn't answer, just nodded once. The third woman, the youngest, still hadn't said a word. She watched everything. Her eyes tracked movement, but she hadn't made a sound in 2 days. Callan knew that silence. It wasn't shyness, it was trauma. 2 days passed, then 3. Callan started sleeping inside again, but in the hallway, not out of fear, but space. The main living dome wasn't built for 5. He didn't mind. He noticed changes. Rel began rearranging things, efficiently, methodically. She found his wife's old glove box and resorted the entire tool wall. She didn't ask. She just knew it needed doing. One morning, she handed him the recalibrator before he even reached for it. Sorry, he learned her name by accident, had mended the damaged solar tarp with nano-stitching thread he forgot he even had. She hadn't spoken once but had repaired 3 systems without being told. The third, the girl, was called Mira. Mav had said it first, whispered it, after Mira braided her hair with old copper wiring from the storage bin. A strange gift, but one the child held onto like it was treasure. On the 6th morning, the dome smelled different. Not just heat and ionized dust, something warmer. Callan walked into the main chamber to find Rel at the stove, heating ration paste and seasoning it with dried herbs his wife had left behind. He hadn't used those in a year. "I didn't ask you to do that," he said. "I didn't do it for you," Rel replied. He almost smiled. That night, Maeve laughed. It wasn't loud, it wasn't long. Just a hiccup of sound that escaped her chest as Mira showed her how to untangle microcords by humming vibrations through them. A trick she must have learned in one of the off-world correction camps, wherever they'd kept her. Callan was by the airlock when he heard it. He froze. That laugh, he hadn't heard it since his wife was still breathing. He looked over. Mira looked up and met his eyes. She didn't smile, but she nodded once. A small, serious alien gesture that didn't ask for thanks, only recognition. He nodded back. Later, after Maeve was asleep and the dome had gone dim with nightlights, Rel sat beside the fire module, legs crossed, her voice low. "We weren't supposed to survive, Verge." He didn't look at her. What happened? They were trying to splice emotions, empathy into military hybrids. "We didn't pass because you felt too much?" Rel didn't answer, just stared at the glow between them. Zari spoke for the first time that night, voice like smoke and steel. "They called us defects. We called each other family." Callan said nothing. He just sat with them until the night grew too quiet to pretend the silence didn't matter anymore. He didn't know what they were to him yet. He didn't ask. But when Mob woke in the middle of the night, screaming from a memory she didn't know how to explain, it was Mira who reached her first. No hesitation, no fear, just arms, just warmth, just choice. The first tremor hit just after dusk, a low, bone-deep hum that rattled the glass in the dome seams and made the solar lamps flicker. Callan Rowe felt it before he heard it. That eerie static pressure that comes when the planet's magnetic belts start collapsing under a flare. He set down the hydrospade and looked east. Across the horizon, a wall of luminous dust rolled toward them, the sky burning crimson where the sun used to be. The storm was coming early this cycle, radiation winds strong enough to melt steel. And that was when Mira fell. She'd been fine that morning, quiet, thin, smiling the way she only did when Mav braided the copper threads back into her pale hair. Now she lay half-conscious near the heater, skin pulsing with faint violet light that shouldn't have been there. Rel knelt beside her cores destabilizing. Zari pressed a hand to Mira's neck. The tremor under her skin felt wrong, like tiny sparks firing beneath the flesh. The splice virus woke up, she muttered. She must have absorbed too much solar charge through the dome leak. Callan crouched beside them, eyes scanning the readings on his wrist pad. Heartbeat erratic, oxygen low, cell temperature spiking. What stops it? An inhibitor, Rel said. V-92 strain. They used it on Verge to keep us alive between tests. Where? Rift Station. He froze. That was 20 clicks through open terrain, with the flare front already less than an hour away. No one survives outside a dome in that, Rel said quietly. Callan stood. Then no one's ever tried with the right reason. He packed fast. SEAL suit, oxygen pack, a rifle he hadn't touched since Earth. Mav clung to his sleeve. She's going to die? Not if I get back. Rel grabbed his arm. Human, listen. The flares out there strip drones to bone. You'll last 10 minutes, then... I'll use 9, he said, sealing the visor. The airlock hissed shut before anyone could answer. Outside was hell made silent. No sound, just vibration. The sky was a living bruise of red and white static, the ground alive with magnetic sparks that crawled across the sand like living veins. Each step felt like walking inside a dying star. He pushed forward. The rover's engine howled against the wind, tires digging through grit that glowed from ion fire. Every few meters, he had to angle the shield to keep the radiation alarms from screaming red. Behind him, the dome lights faded into the storm, swallowed whole. In the rear view, he saw nothing but white. He thought of Maeve's tiny fingers around his wrist when she was born. He thought of his wife's final breath whispering, "Don't let her forget how to love." He thought of 3 alien women, thrown away by every species that had ever touched them, and how they still chose gentleness. He gritted his teeth. Humans don't quit. Inside the dome, chaos breathed in slow motion. The flare light turned everything copper. Rel had stripped Mira's shirt away, pressing cooling packs against her chest, while Zari rerouted the heater's power into the medical bay. Her heart's skipping, Zari said. Keep the field steady. He'll come back. You think he can survive that? Rel didn't answer. Her throat worked once. He's human. They do impossible things for reasons no one understands. The storm worsened. By the time Callan reached Rift Station, half his sensors had melted. The gates were closed, the guards already sealed inside their bunkers. He slammed his fist against the control panel until his knuckles split. Let me in. I need V-92, a distorted voice crackled through the intercom. Trade shut down. Come back after the storm, fool. He raised his rifle and fired once into the sky, not to threaten, but to make them look. I've got a dying hybrid child. Silence. Then a single voice, Base 6, service hatch. He ran. Inside, the medic unit smelled of ozone and antiseptic. He tore through drawers until he found the small black case marked V-92/stabilizer/class restricted. 5 vials left. He stuffed them in his pack, along with thermal wraps and dionyzer tabs. As he turned to leave, the power died. The emergency lights went red. The flare had hit full force. He bolted for the exit, every alarm on his suit screaming. Outside, the wind looked solid, a red ocean made of dust and lightning. The first shockwave hit before he reached the rover. The ground lifted. He was airborne for a heartbeat, then slammed down hard enough to crack his visor. The leak hissed. The Geiger counter wailed. He could barely see the rover. He crawled. Each meter felt like hours. The world dissolved in static and fire. When he finally reached the seat, his hands were bleeding inside the gloves. He slammed the ignition. Nothing. The storm's EMP had fried the coil, so he walked. Back at the dome, Mira was fading fast. Her eyes fluttered open only once. Don't, she whispered. Don't let him come back. Rel squeezed her hand. He's already gone, little sister. The lights flickered. The wind howled beyond the walls, angry at being kept out. Maeve sat by the cot, tears running silent. Hours later, or maybe years, a knock hit the airlock. 1, 2, 3, slow, deliberate. Rel moved first. When the door opened, a wall of dust spilled in, and through it, Callan staggered forward. Suit shredded, visor blackened, arms wrapped around a single satchel clutched to his chest. He collapsed before he crossed the threshold. Zari caught him. Rel ripped the pack open. Inside, the vials, unbroken. Get the injector, Rel ordered. They worked in silence. Mira's skin flickered between violet and gray. Rel steadied her arm, pressed the needle home. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then a faint pulse shimmered under the skin. The glow subsided. Her breathing steadied. When Callan woke, the storm had passed. The dome was dim, lit only by the blue pulse of the generator. His body hurt in places he didn't know existed. Rel sat beside him, hands folded, eyes unreadable. "You're an idiot," she said. He smiled weakly. "Takes one to recognize. You nearly died for her." He looked toward Mira's cot where the young alien slept, color back in her cheeks. "I've buried enough people," he said. Rel exhaled slowly. "You went through the flare for someone who isn't even your species." He met her gaze. "Neither was my wife." She blinked. "She wasn't human?" He shook his head. Half Terran, half lunar colonist. They called her mixed blood. She called herself alive. Rel's lips parted, but no sound came. For the first time, she looked uncertain. "Where we came from," she said finally. "Humans are spoken of like myths. The ones who burn everything they touch but somehow build warmth from ashes." Callan looked down at his blistered hands. "Sounds about right." That night, the storm's afterglow painted the dome silver. The world outside lay buried under glass, sand, and silence. Inside, Mira slept with Maeve curled against her shoulder. Zari cleaned the rifle Callan had dropped, each motion careful, reverent. Rel stood at the viewport, arms folded, watching the distant lightning fade. Callan joined her. "You don't sleep either?" he asked. "Not when something changes." He waited. "You could have let her die," she said. "No one would have blamed you." He glanced at her. "Maybe. But I would have blamed me." Rel turned her head. For the first time, her eyes softened. "We owe you our lives." He shook his head. "You owe me nothing." "Then why risk yours?" He smiled faintly. "Because humans are stupid when they care." Rel laughed, a sound rough from disuse, almost human in its warmth. "Then I hope you stay stupid, Callan Rowe." The next morning, the sky was clean again. The storm had scorched the land flat, but the dome still stood. Callan walked outside, suit patched, lungs still raw. The wind was gentle now, carrying the scent of burned ozone and beginning. He looked back at the dome, a small, crooked shelter glowing against a dead world, and saw movement inside. Maeve laughing, Mira sitting upright, Zari checking a power line, Rel watching him through the glass. Something shifted in him then. Not pity, not duty, something quieter, belonging. He returned inside and dropped his pack. "We'll need a second dome," he said. Rel frowned. "Why?" "Because this one's getting crowded." Zari smirked. "You plan to build it alone?" He met her gaze. "Not if you're staying." Rel tilted her head. "And if we don't, then I'll build it anyway." "So you have somewhere to come back to." The room went silent. Then Mira spoke, her voice hoarse but steady. "I want to stay." Rel looked at her, then at Callan. Something unspoken passed between them. A recognition that this wasn't ownership or mercy, it was choice. "Then we help," Rel said. And just like that, the silence that had haunted the dome broke. That night, when the power lights dimmed and everyone drifted towards sleep, Rel found Callan outside, sitting on a crate beneath the faint aurora still shimmering across the sky. She sat beside him, not close, not far. "You said you don't lock your doors," she murmured. "I never saw the point." She nodded slowly. "Maybe that's why we're still here." He looked at her, the glow of the aurora painting her metallic skin in soft light. "You planning to leave?" "Not tonight." They sat in silence, the kind that didn't hurt anymore. And somewhere inside the dome, Maeve laughed again in her sleep. The sky stayed quiet for 5 rotations. No solar flare warnings, no sand sweeps, no power grid stutters. Just calm. A stillness that made the world feel like it was holding its breath. Callan Rowe used that breath wisely. By sunrise on the 6th morning, he stood at the far edge of his ridge dome compound, boots planted in red rock, surveying the flattened stretch of land near the old atmospheric silo. It was the only place left untouched by storm scars. A half-dead sensor tower leaned nearby, forgotten but sturdy. Behind him, Rel approached. Her stride was calm, but her arms were folded tight across her chest like she was bracing for a conversation she wasn't sure she wanted. "You're still thinking about this second dome," she said flatly. Callan didn't turn. "Not thinking. Planning. You don't need to prove anything." "I'm not." She squinted. "Then why build it?" "Because 5 people in one dome is fine for survival. Not for living." Her silence lasted long enough that he glanced back. "I'm not trying to own you," Bichori added. "This isn't a human claim. You're afraid we'll leave." He met her gaze, steady. "No, I'm afraid you'll stay and never feel like you chose to." That afternoon, Callan brought out the construction crates. Heavy manual tools, weld tape, solar panels still wrapped in old Union foil. He'd stored them away after his wife died. Thought he'd never build again. Now he knelt in the dust, unsealing old blueprints with cracked fingertips. Behind him, a shadow fell. "Sorry." Wordless, scarred, eyes sharp. She dropped a bucket of microspikes at his feet. "You'll need these for the foundation," she muttered. "Thought you weren't interested." She looked toward the dome where Mav and Mira were crouched over a wiring harness, giggling as Mira threaded glow fiber into a braid. "I was wrong," Jerry said. "This isn't a cage." Not anymore. By day's end, they had the support frame marked. 3 circles etched in the ground. One for structure, one for solar power, one for water recycling. It wasn't much, but it looked like something. Rel inspected the lines. "You don't build like a military man," she said. "Never was one." "Your wife?" "Doctor." She nodded once. "That explains the mess." But there was a faint smile at the edge of her mouth. That night, they didn't sit in silence. They sat around a table. Mira served broth made from protein cubes and the last of the terra herbs. Maeve told a story, nothing complicated, just a retelling of a childhood memory from Earth's rainforest that her mother used to tell. Zari sharpened tools, listening with a face too hard for her hands. Rel sat across from Callan, silent but present. And for the first time, Callan didn't feel like a guest in his own shelter. He felt surrounded, not owned, not owed, just included. The next day, Rel woke before the sun. She walked the site perimeter, measured the wind pull off the ridge, then tightened the anchor cords without being asked. Later, she found Callan leveling the first beam. "You're off by 2 degrees, she said. "Am I?" "You didn't calculate for magnetic sink. The ridge pulls south this cycle." He adjusted the tool. "You always this precise?" "I was built to be." Callan looked up. "But you're not just what you were built to be, right?" Her jaw flexed. "That's the first time anyone's ever asked that." Mira helped Maeve string a signal line between the dome poles. At one point, the wind caught the braid in her hands, lifting it like a ribbon. Maeve laughed, and Mira smiled. Not a twitch, not a fragment. A full, soft smile. Rel saw it from across the clearing. So did Callan. He turned to Rel. "You stayed together after Verge." "Why?" "No one else would take us," she said simply. "We were each other's only choice." "And now?" She didn't answer. But later, as she passed him a wrench, her fingers brushed his. Not accidentally, just enough, just once. That night, the second dome took shape. Not much. A frame, a power spine, 2 solar flaps already rising toward the darkening sky. The wind shifted colder. The temperature dropped. Callan looked up from his work. "We'll need a heating core soon." Rel handed him one, without a word. Inside, Maeve drew with black carbon on synth paper. 5 figures, 2 domes, 1 smile. She handed it to Callan. "This is us," she whispered. He pointed to one tall figure. "That's you," she giggled. "That's Rel." "She's taller than you." Rel stood nearby, arms folded. "Only when he's kneeling." Callan smirked. "You sure about this arrangement?" Rel tilted her head. "You mean living here?" He hesitated. "No, I mean staying, choosing it." She walked over, close enough that the air between them felt electric. "You said something once," she murmured, "that we don't belong to you." He nodded. She touched his shoulder. Then don't ask us to stay. Just keep making it possible. The dome lights dimmed to night cycle. Rel found Callan by the outer airlock, staring at the stars through the clear panel. She stepped beside him, quiet. He didn't speak. I've had commanders try to claim me. Traders try to break me. Scientists try to splice me into something useful. And, he asked. They failed. Callan looked at her. Really looked. What do you want to be? She looked toward the half-finished dome, then toward Maeve, laughing as Mira taught her a lullaby in a language that had no name anymore. I want to be safe, she said, and I wanted to feel like I chose to be. That night, she didn't sleep far from him, not beside, but not apart, close enough that her breath synced with his, close enough that choice became the loudest thing in the room. The snow came quiet, not real snow, of course, just ion frost drifting off the upper ridge, brittle white crystals that danced through the atmosphere like feathers made of static. On Zephyr 9, that was as close to winter as you'd get, but to Maeve, it felt like something special. She stood barefoot in the dust, arms outstretched, catching the flakes on her sleeves. Mira crouched nearby, showing her how to draw spirals in the ground using the crystals before they melted. They laughed softly, their breath glowing faintly in the cold air. Inside the half-finished second dome, Callan Rowe hammered the final support into place. His arms burned, his coat was stiff with sweat and dust, but the shelter was standing, just like the last one, maybe stronger. Across from him, Rel fastened the final bolt with a click. She stood, wiped her hands on her belt, and surveyed the work. It's crooked, she said. Callan exhaled. Like me. Zari smirked from the corner where she was silining a seam. Stable, though. That's what matters. Mira slipped inside, cheeks flushed, hands covered in frost dust. Maeve wants to name it. Rel turned slowly. The dome? The home. That night, they all gathered around the fire inside the original shelter, not because they had to, but because they still preferred it. The air was thick with the scent of bread and nutrient broth. Steam curling around the glow sticks hung like stars from the ceiling. Maeve climbed onto Callan's lap with a thin sheet of carbon fiber in her hand. I made the sign, she said. He looked at it. 5 stick figures, 2 domes, and 1 word carved in the center with a solder pen she'd borrowed from Zari without asking. Ours. Simple, untranslated, real. Mira leaned close. She wants to hang it above the new dome. So people know what? Callan asked gently. Maeve tilted her head like it was the most obvious thing in the galaxy. That we belong here. The next day they did it together. Callan held the ladder. Rel placed the sign. Zari fastened the wires. Mira tied the bottom with a scrap of braided wire Mauve had made herself. No speeches, no ceremony, just hands working in rhythm and silence that meant something. When they stepped back, the name caught the light like fire. Ours. That night, Rel didn't sit across from Callan. She sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders brushed. She didn't ask permission. She didn't explain. She simply chose. Your wife, she said quietly. You still love her? He nodded. Always will. And us? Her voice didn't tremble, but her eyes were steady, fierce and vulnerable all at once. I didn't expect this, he said. Didn't want to replace her. But I didn't expect you. She looked down. So, what are we? Callan exhaled slowly. Not property, not command, not rescue. He turned his hand over, letting his fingers hover near hers. We're just people. Choosing to stay. Together, she didn't take his hand. She laid hers on top of it. Zari didn't speak about it. She just moved her things into the new dome, 1 box at a time. When Callan asked if she'd need help, she rolled her eyes and handed him the heavier crate. Mira stayed with Maeve that night, curled together like sisters, one humming soft alien melodies, while the other traced glow dust stars on the ceiling with a stick of charcoal. They didn't ask questions. They didn't need to. No one said the word family, but it hung in the air like gravity, shaping everything. A few weeks passed. The second dome held. The wind softened. The frost came less often. Rel spent more nights by the fire now, not to guard, but to rest. Mira began sleeping without nightmares. Zari taught Mav how to wire solar patches and didn't flinch when the child hugged her mid-lesson. Callan started planting again, in old crate beds outside, packed with mineral soil. He wasn't sure anything would grow, but he did it anyway. That's what humans did. They tried, even after losing everything, even when the world had called them broken. One afternoon, as the ridge burned orange beneath a dying sun, Callan stood with Rel on the edge of the dome yard, watching the horizon. She spoke without turning. We were made for combat, for blood, for silence. And yet, you gave us a place where we didn't have to be any of that. He looked at her. You weren't made wrong, Rel. You were just never given the right soil. She smiled, tired but warm. So what now? He tilted his head toward the domes. Now we build. Later that night, the five of them sat at the same table. One lamp, one fire. No vows, no papers, just warmth. Just staying. In the end, they weren't survivors anymore. They were builders. Of homes. Of hearts. Of second chances. And though none of them had asked for love, it had grown anyway. Like moss in the cracks of stone, stubborn and alive. They hadn't said vows. They had simply stayed. And that was enough. For them, for Maeve, for Callan, for the galaxy that might never understand, but could never take it away.